Okay, so we're going to begin Hilchos Basar B'Chalov Siman Tzadik Beis. We're going to go on to Sif Hey. Before we go on to Sif Hey, just a quick review of what we discussed in the last Ramah of Sif Daled. The Ramah brings down that Kli HaNeser Meblias Isur Lo Amrina Bechaticha Nases Nevela. That's how he holds the mice over here, even though he brings a slightly different din in Hilchos Taaruvot. But that's a very important concept. In other words, we have to establish. We want to know if Hanan, which is a serious matter, applies to a Kli too. So he makes it clear to us that, for the most part, a Kli that has a Blia of an Isser, we don't say Hanan on. Okay. Now, the Roiva Poisim we explained say that it basically, this is true, just about any kind of Kli, regardless of the material. In a Kli Cheres, however, there is a machlokes. As the Ramah brings down later on, that according to the Mordechai, there is that Hanan aspect in Kli Cheres. And the reason for that, because you can't separate. Kli Cheres, basically, you're stuck with the blias in the Cheres, in the Dafne Keli, in the walls of the Keli. You cannot, therefore, extract it through Hagala, which means that the whole thing becomes one piece of Nevela. The Shach, of course, goes along with the rest of the poskim that he says even the Mordechai doesn't say that. He's not referring to the Kli itself becoming a Hanan. If anything, we're talking about the Blias itself. So that's an important distinction. When it comes to Blias, the Blias can become Nevela. The Keli, for the Keli to come on Nevela, we never really heard of anything like that. The walls of a Keli become Nevela. And that's what is implied over here too. That even though the Ramah says you don't say Hanan by Keli, that's Legabe de Keli, but you do say Hanan Legabe de Blias. So the Ramah would hold, like many others, that there would be Hanan in the Blias. The Ramban is one of those that says there's no Hanan in the Blias. That's important to know, that there is such an opinion that says even in Blias you cannot say Hanan. And that's going to a little bit have to do with this coming Seif. In other words, it somehow is related to what we're going to learn next. But before we go into Sifei, maybe I should tell you the Makor. The Makor here is in the Pasuk, actually, not just a Mishnah or Gemara. It's in the Pasuk in Sefer Vayikra. There's a whole sugya in Zvachim on this. This is not Chulin, actually. The Ifhei has to do with the Gemara in Zvachim, Tzadik Vav and Tzadik Zayin, and the Makor of that is a Pasuk. In Sefer Vayikra, Parshas Tzav, I'm talking about Korbanos. Korbanos are cooked. Unless it's a korban oila which is brought in the mizbeach that is consumed by fire, korbanos, you're not going to eat raw meat, you're going to cook it. Whether it's kochim kalim or kochim, kochim. In other words, regardless of what korban we're talking about, something which is holy, you have to be concerned about noisar. Noisar means that after a certain amount of time, anything that's left over that has not been consumed, has not been eaten, needs to be burned. In other words, you should not leave over from the korban, but in the event something was left, it's one of those, it's like a lava nita klase, basically. Don't leave over. If you did, if there's something left over, make sure you burn it. In other words, you cannot have that food after a certain amount of time passed, depending on which korban we're talking about. All right, now what happens with the pots? Pots that you're cooking, korbanos, if somebody's not a kohen, you don't, if it's a korban shlomim, of course, the baalim eats from it, but other korbanos, and the kohanim eat from it. A zar, in other words, a non-kohen, cannot eat from certain korbanos. And in the pots where you're having the korbanos cooked, the pots are absorbing. So what do you do to the pots if you want to make them kosher? If you want to, in other words, make them usable for everyone? And it's not really a question of making it usable for everyone, because these are pots that are used in the Beis HaMikdash. So the real question is making it usable for the Kohanim themselves. Why shouldn't it be usable for the Kohanim themselves? Well, as Rashi points out over there, or actually over here in the Chumash, that we are concerned with the blias of the Kabbanas. Blias, it's kosher food. Yeah, but there's noisar. In other words, even though you may no longer have any content. In other words, in the pots, there's no meat. But these pots need to be cleansed because we don't want even the blias to remain behind, because that would be noiser on the blias. So what does the Torah prescribe for these pots after you're done? Uchli cheres asher tevushal bo. If you use the kli cheres to cook, yishover. And there was a lot of broken pottery that the Gemara says was one of the miracles, was that it all absorbed. It was absorbed into the grounds of the Beis Hamikdash, shards all over the place. And I'm curious if any of those potteries that they're finding today, if it's from that. Who knows? It's interesting.
Back that far.
Oh yeah, even from the Bais Rishon, they're finding things. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised. Pottery, we understand why it needs to be broken, because there's no way to make hagala to it. What's interesting, however, is copper, metal. V'im b'chlei nechoishes bushala, if you cook the korbanos in copper vessels, copper pots, umorak v'shutaf b'mayim. What you need to do is to scrub it and rinse it in water. I think that's the best translation for morak v'shutaf. Okay, what's that all about? Morak v'shutaf b'mayim. What for? What does that accomplish? Apparently, you can save the pot. You don't have to break it, but you do have to clean it very, very well. Melicha means to scrub. The real word in English is to scourge. Have you heard of that one? Yeah. In other words, you want to remove. When you use Melicha, you want to remove any vestige, anything, any leftovers from the pot. You want to get rid of the blias. But wait a minute. Does Melicha and Shtifa B'mayim just get rid of the blias? I mean, what's with Hagala? I mean, we're talking about heat and cooking. It says why you can rinse it, scrub it with water. I mean, I know Brillo's is really good, but will that get rid of the blias? So that's a machlokes in the Gemara. What's going on over here? This is a big sugya, a very interesting sugya of what's going on here, because the Gemara in Zvachim needs to determine. There's two things that are being determined, maybe others too. But two of the most important things that need to be determined in Gemara, which there is discussions about, is what's this Melicha v'Shtifa doing here? We haven't seen that in Hilchas Hagala. And by the way, we need to determine if the need for Melicha and Shtifa here is because the blias are mefapeh in the whole keli. I mean, what if you did not use the whole pot? You just used half of it. Right? I mean, you just filled it up a little bit. I mean, you got to do the whole thing. Is it mefapeh all over the keli? Do you have to be concerned about the whole keli? Maybe just a little bit. So there's a discussion about piapua, which we're all familiar with, the concept of flavors or blias actually traveling throughout the keli. So that's the central point of the sugya. In other words, how does piapua or does Bipua affect the entire keli or not? So the first machlokes, Rebbe and the Chachamim, is about the concept of Melicha and Shtifa. Basically, because it doesn't really have to do with what we're learning here, but just basically the little bit of background of that. They say like this: it was used with heat. Obviously, you need Hagala. Hagala, there's no doubt about that. What's understood from this Gemara, that Hagala is required. When a keli is used with heat to remove blias, that's what will be required. The question is, the Torah here tells us Melicha and Shtifa. It doesn't say Hagala. It doesn't say anything about removing it through heat. So what's this concept of Melicha and Shtifa? So Rebbe says, besides Hagala, you need to do Melicha and Shtifa in cold water. Why? We never do that anywhere. Gzeras HaKosov. The Torah says so. When it comes to Kodshim, when it comes to Korbanos, when it comes to the issue of Noisar, the blias over here, besides Hagala, go ahead and do Melicha Shtifa with cold water. Everywhere else, you don't need it. Just here. The Rabbanan learned from the pasuk. They have a different way of learning into the pasuk. That the kavanah over here, the Torah was that the Melicha is the Hagala. So what's different about Kodshim and other and other isurim, is that here you need shtifa too. So the shtifa is nikol. Go ahead and rinse it with water. That you don't have everywhere else. Okay, that's basically the difference of opinion between Rebbe and the Chachamim as to what Melicha and shtifa really is. Is it something extra, both? Or no, Melicha is Hagala, and shtifa is what is extra. They both understand it, however, to mean that there is obviously Xeris HaKosov. There is Xeris HaKosov here that makes an additional requirement of Korbanos. All right. Took care of that. Now, let's go on to the other diyun, the other discussion in the Gemara, which is the larger discussion of what exactly happens in the Keli. In other words, what do we learn from this pasuk? Or can we learn anything from this pasuk of Melicha and shtifa that tells us something about Piapua? Can we learn from this pasuk and from that sugya that Piapua does travel throughout the Keli? Perhaps to better understand it, let me borrow a concept from Yore Deah that you may recall, and that is Cham Miktsosor Cham Kuloi, which we went through a little bit. Cham Miktsosor Cham Kuloi basically tells us a little bit about the nature of heat. And all of us, I think we all understand what conductors are. There are some elements that are better conductors of electricity, right? We're familiar with that, yeah. So in the same way that certain materials conduct better different things, the Chachamim tell us that Cham Miktsosor Cham Kuloi, when part of a piece of metal is hot, the whole thing is hot. It may not be as hot, but it's hot. You could try it out with your blech. If you use a small blech, not too big, use a small blech, and the blech covers, you have two flames, or two burners. One burner is on, the other burner is off. But you cover both. It's meant to cover both burners. In the event you need to use, put more pots. So the blech on top of the flame is going to be hot, much more than Yad Soledes Boive. The part of the blech that is away from the flame will be warm to the touch, and maybe even a little bit hot, depending how high the flame is. Right? And that's the reason for that is because the heat travels in the metal. So here we have an idea. I thought that maybe it would help us understand that there are certain materials that allow for the heat or perhaps the tam to travel. And that's the question here. We know that about heat, but what about the tam? Does bishul allow for the tam to travel throughout the kedera? Does it just go everywhere or not?
You mean in the walls of the kedera?
In the walls of the kedera. Even though the food didn't get there, we will see next time, I don't think we can get to it today, that there are nafkaminas in different situations. We're going to be talking today about a pot that's under fire that has a little bit of milk spilled on it. Outside of it. In other words, no longer are we concerned right now with milk falling into the pot, into food. Right now, the balabas says, some milk, a drop of milk fell on the outside of this pot. On the outer surface, yeah. And we will see that it's very interesting. We may take it for granted. Oh, what's the big deal? Just a couple of drops. No, it may make a difference.
Is there some?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's some food in the pot. Yeah. And, all right, we will see that it makes a difference, but we will also see later on that so many little details can modify the halacha, can change the halacha. For example, you may have one halacha if milk falls on the surface of the pot on the outside, whether the pot is covered or not. Does it make a difference if it's covered? We will see that it could make a difference, or doesn't make a difference, if the drops of milk fell on the handle and not exactly on the surface of the pot.
Let me ask, in an area on the pot where there's food, an area where there's
no, we haven't gotten to that yet. Yeah, we haven't even gotten to that. We haven't introduced the problems yet. No. We're just saying this is the scenarios that that the Gemara has to try to figure out from the sugya of kochim, of korbanas. Can we infer from that the din of pipua b'shar yisurim? Because we want to know from that case, which only concerns korbanos really, can we learn from that about what we have to deal with sometimes? Isurim, forget about kochin, being mefapea. So that's going to be the question. So we're going to deal with steam or vapor that can make a difference. It's falling in the handle. I thought that was a very interesting one because the handle is connected to the pot, but perhaps it's a separate part of the pot. So even though you may say falling on the surface of the pot can affect the pot, does that mean that falling on the handle will also affect the pot? Can it travel that far? Because we have such thing as cham mitzasa cham kula. Perhaps this is hot, this is hot. Does it make a difference if that handle is screwed on or it's one piece? All of this is not, I'm not making it up. It's actually brought down hechetimtzes by various, either Rabbi Eger or others, who talk about these minor differences of how they may make a difference. But I thought that was very interesting. So we'll discuss those differences. So here we have a sugya that concerns kachim, and if you read the Gemara, it does not appear that there is any conclusion, any conclusive opinion as to does piapur really happen throughout the Kedera or not. It doesn't appear so clear. Even though Rashi and Tosfos seem to be saying, what's the question? Why is everybody asking questions about piapur? In the language of Tosfos especially, you see that he says, if something is hot, the whole thing gets affected. If we're talking about bishul, the whole thing is affected. But obviously it's not so partial for the rest of the Rishonim and Achronim, because it's not so clear from the Gemara. There's no real conclusion. And that is why we have various shitas, which we'll review now, various machlokes on how to understand the Gemara.
So what's happening in Gemara?
Okay, so now we have like this. The concern of the Gemara, or the concern of the Rishonim right now, would be with the tipas chalav that fell on the surface of a keli versus falling into the pot of food, if it's mefapea on the whole keli or not. Okay, it's not clear from the Gemara. If we can infer from Gemara tells us about korbanos,
yes,
about Melicha and shtifa, that you got to do it regardless.
No, but what's the problem they're trying to solve by the Melicha?
No, that's not the reason. In other words, that's the sugya of the korbanos
requirement. The korbanos, what problem? They're trying to solve a problem with the shtifa.
Why? Well, why is Melicha and shtifa required?
What is the problem that requires it?
In other words, what is it? Well, obviously there's an absorption of blias from korbanos. That was the problem. Melicha and shtifa is interesting. I mean, it's different than hagala. It doesn't say just do hagala. It says also do Melicha and shtifa. All right. So we said that there's two opinions as to what that means. But
are we doing the Melicha inside?
No, the whole thing. Shtifa's from the outside, really, and Melicha's from the inside.
And because you had the milk, so.
Yeah. So here we're not really doing Melicha shtifa to milk on a pleishik pot. We're doing real hagala. It's just that the case of korbanos uses the terms Melicha shtifa, which actually are, regardless of how you hold, like Rebbe or the Chachomim, it's an additional step. At least the shtifa is.
Melicha and shtifa actually to get the actual peat that.
No, just blias.
Blias?
The blias. So the blias should not become noisar, as Rashi says in the Chumash.
Wasn't there, Gemara, if I remember the Gemara correctly, wasn't there in the next day supposed to be the Hagala?
Well, there's a question: can you use can you cook the next day too, depending on which korban you're talking about? Yeah, that's something else.
That is the Hagala. There's a question about whether that can qualify as a Hagala.
Well, obviously, it would make a difference. You're right. It would make a difference whether the keli is being used or not. Here, we're talking about a case where the keli is not being used. There's another question. Well, if it's not being used, it's going to be nisim tam of gam anyway. After a while, yeah. But before it becomes nisim tam of gam, it already becomes also. So that's another question.
It depends on how long the noise takes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
24 hours.
Right. Yeah.
It could be something that you can
right.
for 4 hours.
It all depends when you cooked the korbanos. Did you cook it at night or not? You see what I mean? So it's by the time you get to the other, it may be already too late. It may be already noisy. But so you're right. Had it been cooked during the day, you may not have the problem.
You sure the Melicha and shtifa is going on? Melicha and shtifa. If you something out, that gets rid of.
Yes.
Table wall.
So what did you
scrub them out?
So what did? No. So remember. Rebbe said that's besides hagala. It says Merika Shtifel bar. Bar means in Aramaic besides.
Yes.
Hagola.
Okay, so what do you need the Merika for?
Xeris HaKosov. Just that's all. The Chachamim learn, no, Merika is the Hagola. So what's the Shtifa for? The Shtifa is Xeris HaKosov. That's the only difference between Rebbe and the Chachamim. Yeah. Very interesting. But this is concerning Kodshim. But the Rishonim says, well, can we? That's the question. The big question here is, can we learn from that sugya the din of piapu, of tipas chalav falling on the kedera? Is there anything to learn from there? Just like over there you learn from Merika and Shtifa, you apply it regardless of how much of the keli was used. Regardless, even if you use that half, you've got to do the whole Merika Shtifa to the whole keli. That's what it's understood. Can we apply that, or can we learn anything from that? The Gabi Shari Surim. So our example involves chalav. We're learning Basar b'chalav here now. There is, by the way, there will be a difference between if it's chalav falling on Niktera or an Isser falling on Niktera. But right, because they're both heter. Basar and chalav are both, each one by themselves is heter. But let's, for the most part, let's just focus on that, on Basar and chalav, and not on Shari Surim. So we have tipas chalav falling on the keli. What's going to be the din? Is there pipua b'chol keli? That's the question. So we have various shittas. We have the smag, and by the way, several of the shittas are brought down in the Beis Yosef himself. He brings them down. So he brings down the smag, and he says like this: from the Gemara, it's mashma that bishul is mefaper b'chol kli, and that's why he says there's a need for Merika and Shtifa. In other words, that's why the pasuk makes this requirement of Merika and Shtifa b'chol kli. So he says basically, it's understood from that Gemara that the same halacha that applies in Kodshim, the Korbanos, would apply everywhere else. If Merika Shtifa is required there, Merika Shtifa is required everywhere else. You don't need really Merika and Shtifa? Yeah, you're right. You don't really need Merika Shtifa, but we're talking about, according to Rebbe, that it's after the Hagala. In other words, something is required. Some form of cleansing is required. Why? Because, according to Rebbe, Merika Shtifa is after the Hagala. According to the Chachamim, Merika is the Hagala, but Shtifa is the extra detail required in the Korbanos. So they both, everybody says you're going to need Hagala if it was used with heat and not used with cold, right? It's not just blood that's sitting in a vessel, it's Korbanos being cooked. So we have Bliya, so we have Piapua. So the Smag says it's understood that the pasuk requires something there, then obviously because it's mefapea. But it's not so simple. The Smag, also brought down by Beis Yosef, says, no, it's a ba'aya, it's a question, shelo ifshite, he says. It was never, it's not conclusive in the Gemara if what is happening through Bishul is called Piapua. In other words, that Piapua happens as a result of Bishul. It's not so clear. Therefore, even though the Gemara there reaches some sort of conclusion, you can't use the Gemara's conclusion to infer from it the Gabi Shari Surim, because maybe the Gemara is talking about Xeris HaKosov by Kodshim. That by Kodshim you need Merika and Shtifa. So in other words, you can't really learn from that because the Gemara is focusing there on the Xeris HaKosov that's unique to Kodshim. So you can't really draw a conclusion or infer from that like other scenarios, cases that involve Shari Surim. See, it's not so clear. So he remains with the suffix as to, does Piapua really happen within the walls of a pot? Can the milk falling on top of the pot travel throughout the whole pot? Okay. Chuvas Maram, who actually quotes the Chuvas Rabbeinu Shimshon, that from the Gemara it's mashma, according to him, the bishul is not mefapeh b'chol kli. He says just the opposite for the smag. He understands that no. On the contrary, I understand that bishul does not enable piapu in the whole kli. Why? Because by kodshim I needed a special pasuk to require Merika and Shtifa. Because it's Xeris HaKosov. That over there you need that. What do I understand from that? That had it not been kodshim, there wouldn't be any requirement at all. You understand how he interprets the Gemara? Just the opposite from the Smag. No, he says, don't tell me that this is the same. On the contrary, over there we see that it's Xeris HaKosov. That's the whole focus there. Merika Shtifa is unique. We're talking about korbanos. We're talking about kachim. This is a unique lashon, a unique requirement. It doesn't say simple agala. I understand from that had it not been korbanos, I wouldn't need Melicha and shtifa. In other words, if there was, in other words, we're talking about now. Remember, piapua. We're not talking about the area that was used. I mean, area that is being used is used. The question only is concerning the area that was not used. And why should it be a problem? Because of piapua. Maybe it travels. I mean, the Gemara says you've got to get rid of the whole keli. You got to, or if it's klei cheres, you got to break it. If it's klei nechoshes, you got to make a shtifa to the whole thing. Why? Because it does travel, apparently. Right?
Then how does it get clean? Assuming that it fell in the exact same spot, the milk is on the outside. Easy as possible.
Yeah, well, it's always the same. It can travel from the inside out, from the outside in. It's not only spreading on the surface.
I understand that, but the question is how to think about going if there's no piapua.
If there is no piapua?
If you hold poor.
Right.
Depending on the vessel.
Right.
How far even in that location?
Well, with it, where the food is not a question because.
All the way to the
No, because either way, that area.
The thickness of the wall?
to the wall would.
Right.
The milk would have spilled on the outside exactly parallel to the inside.
Right.
Okay?
That's the easiest. That's true.
The easiest
Right.
situation.
Right.
If the wall of the vessel, the kli is, you sometimes.
Right. It is. Right. That's
Okay.
we're going to see that.
How
Yeah.
far does that make a difference to the piapua traveling that thickness opposed to just up and down peel?
No, it doesn't, because apparently, if you hold piapua, we will see. Depends if you learn like the shak or taz. It's going to make a small difference. If you say it travels, if you say it does, it just goes. If you say it doesn't, it doesn't. In other words, the thickness concerning the question of yes or no does not make a difference. The thickness will make a difference, however, and it's good you brought it up, whether you have shishim of moisture and other blias in the thickness of the wall to be mevatel the drop. Or the other way around, I'm sorry. You can, well, either way. If you have shishim in the tafshil, in the dish, can negate the thickness of the wall, which in Hilchos Taaruvot, remember Ilan, we covered that too a little bit. Some kelim are thin and some are thicker. You may not have shishim, can negate the whole thickness of a keli, unless it's very, very thin or flat. Yeah. So it is a problem. It's definitely a problem, and sometimes we don't always make that distinction because it's hard to figure that out. If the whole walls have become treif, as we're going to see in our seif, it could be a problem of how to get the food out. Not even if the food there is okay, how do you get it out without it becoming treif as you're pouring it out? If the walls are treif now, that's going to be one of the issues of this halacha. How do you deal with that if the halacha says that the walls are treif now, but the food is not? How do you get it out without making it treif as it's coming out? So we will see that. Okay, so these are the shitas. Either you hold, you can't learn from the Gemara. And it was like the smak, which is basically what the Shuchan Aruch holds like. He holds like the smak that it's not very, very clear what the halacha is, and therefore you have to be concerned, and therefore it will make a difference where the tipas challah fell. Like you said, parallel, across the food, or it fell the mokom reikon. It fell in an empty area where there's no food across it. That's what the Mechaber is going to tell us. So, or you hold, like the smag, of course, the Pashut way of understanding Gemara, is that it's mefapeah. You see, there's a requirement of shtifa Melicha. But there is, as we will see soon with the Mordechai, you can easily say that you can't learn from that for other Isurim because Melicha shtifa is a Xeris HaKosef concerning only kachim. And therefore over there it was a special requirement, but to say that because of that, Piapua applies everywhere else, not necessarily. Anyway, Rashi and Tosfos, I think it's pretty clear from both that they hold that Bishul is mefapeah. And what's good about this svara, the Aruch HaShulchan says that based on the svara that you hold that Piapua happens, it really won't matter. Ilan, this is very interesting. It won't matter, according to Rashi and Tosfos, where the tipas challah fell. Did it fall across the food? Did it fall in Mokum? Once you hold this Piapua, then it's everywhere, regardless. And you're not really going to have a problem if you're able to have shishim keneged the tipas chalav that fell in the tavshil. It won't make a difference. So Rashi and Tosfos really make it very easy, but the Mechaber and many of the Achronim don't seem to go along for some reason with Rashi and Tosfos, which is tzorich chiyun. It's a question. Rashi and Tosfos tell us at least mention them. They don't even mention them for some reason. They just they mention the other Rishonim. Rashi and Tosfos seem to be implying that Piyapor is a given. And once you say something is a given, then you don't have to worry yourself too much about where did it fall. The where did it fall that we're going to see inside the Seif is going to make a difference according to the Smak, which the Rabbi Yosef quotes, and that's how he holds. So maybe we'll read Seif Hey and then we'll go into the Mordechai. Seif Hey says like this: the Mechaber brings down the tipas cholav shenoflo ala kedera she'etzel ha'esh mibachutz. The drop of milk here fell on the surface of the kedera that is on the fire, or close to the fire. It's hot. It's at least yatzel boy. This question, by the way, can apply to a kedera that was removed from the fire, but it's still very, very hot, as opposed to a kedera that is not hot yet. So we definitely are assuming that the kedera is very hot. So this drop fell on the surface. Im naflo keneged tavshil. If it fell parallel, like you said, to the food, ein tzorech ela shishim keneged tipa. All you need is 60 in the tavshil against this drop, and you're safe. Safe meaning about the food. We will see there's a question regarding what do you do with the kedera. Even if you say the food, do you still have to make a gala to the kedera? Had some drops of milk fall on it, you have shishim keneged, the food is safe. That's another question. Do you still need hagala to the kedera? And if you need it, is it meikar adin or is it just a chumrah? So if you're in good luck, if the tipa fell close to the food, across the food, no problem. If you have shishim keneged, the tipa shemefapat lifnim, because we will say that the tipa there, because of the heat, it's mefapea, right? It will travel inside. It will get to inside. And it will mix, of course, and it will be bottle. That's if you hold it's mepapea. And even if it's usually not mepapea, even if you hold it's not mepapea, the fact that it's across the food automatically makes it mepapea inside. According to the way the Shach learns in the Smak, that if you hold that it's not mepapea, it still will be mepapea. It will still fall in. The Taz is going to say about this one little difference with the Shach. Actually, the Shach is the Beis Yosef and others. It's not just the Shach, it's the Gro. They all learn Pshat that if you don't say it's mefapea, if it's close to the food, it's anyway goes in. But the fact that it's close to the food. The Taz is going to say, no, the way I understood the Smag is that if you hold it's mefapea, okay, fine. But even if you don't hold it, it's not mefapea, then it stays where it is. It just stays. It doesn't move anywhere. Well, if it doesn't move, great. And the Chazon Ish is going to tell us that there's a little bit of a nafkamina between the Shach and the Taz, or the Beis Yosef and the Taz, on how you learn Pshat in the Smak. In other words, in the scenario where you hold that maybe it's not mefapea. If you hold it's mefapea, then it's okay. The problems begin if it's not mefapea. What does not mefapea mean? So if it's across the food, it's less of an issue. Because if it's across the food, either it stays where it is, or like the Shach learns, and Basar says, no, if it's across the food, regardless of what happens, it's going to go in anyway. So that's what the Mechaber says here. If it fell across the food, ein tzorech elo shishim keneged atipa shemefapat lifnim, v'have ki'ilu naflo b'tavshem, and it is as though it fell into the actual food. So if your wife tells you, a little bit of milk spilled in the pot, but Baruch Hashem, nothing fell in. Is it okay? Well, not so sure yet. We've got to figure it out. Where did it fall in the pot? Oh, it fell in the lid. If it fell in the lid, it's okay. You know why? He doesn't say it here. But the Poiskim, I think the Achronim, bring down the example of the lid. When it falls in the lid, that means there's a lot of steam inside. The steam is running all the way to the top. So a tipa of chalav falling on the lid as opposed to on another part of the surface of the pot is as though it fell inside. So if you have shishim against it, you're okay. You don't have to be concerned. The big problem will be only when it falls on the surface of a pot, not parallel to the food. That is where the problems begin. V'im nafla b'makom hareikon, if it fell in the empty spot of the pot, and you hold hi mefapas, v'hi mefapas b'doifen hagdera, it could possibly be mefapea. If you hold mefapea, the shachs, I think the shach over here learns that mefapea would not be the problem. The problem if it's not mefapea, because when you say it's not mefapea, it doesn't mean not mefapea at all. I have a suffix, maybe it travels a little bit, for 2-3 inches. And the problem then be that it has made the blias in that surface of 2-3 inches a nevela. And once you have a larger surface affected through the tipas cholav, you may not have shishim against that surface anymore. So we are concerned that falling in the mokom hareikon, in the empty spot, it will be mefapea all the way till the line of liquid. It was just above the line of liquid. We're concerned. It may just go till there. It may go less, it may go more. We don't know. It's a suffix. But if it were to just go till there, then wow. Now all of a sudden you have a large surface that is treif. Was because why treif? Because there's blias of basar there. So there's chanan, or whatever you want to call it. The whole thing is treif inside the walls of that pot. That area at least, not the whole pot. So, but the mechaber uses the opinion of, if you hold this mefapea, because the shach seems to be saying that if you hold this mefapea, then no matter where it falls, it eventually falls inside. If you hold that blias are mefapea, things falling, the tipas cholab falling on is mefapea, then I don't care where it falls, piapua would mean that eventually it will get to the roitev. So he says the problem is if you say it's not mefapea. What does that mean? It is, but it's not a lot. And if it's not a lot, it could be enough, big enough, then you're going to have a problem now. But the mechaber learns a little bit different. He's saying, obviously he's learning that if it's not mefapea, we don't have a problem. It's not mefapea. But he says, no, we have a concern that it's mefapea, but how much? Not throughout the whole kedera. So the mechaber learns pshat in that if it fell b'mokom hareikon, there's a concern that even if you hold it's mefapea partially. So the Meforshim talk about it. How could it be partially, not the whole, either the whole or nothing? So I think the Grove here explains. Partially is partially. In other words, it is a possibility that piapua could be partial. That's the Grove, I think, speaks about it over here. That piapua does not necessarily mean throughout. It can. We have a suffix. Even if you hold piapua, that piapua could possibly be a partial piapua. And if you have a partial piapua, that means it didn't go all over the pot. It didn't eventually mix with the food. That means it covered an extensive area which you may not have shishim against it. And that's what the mechaber is concerned. That if it's naflo b'mokom hareikon v'hi mefapas b'doifen hagdera ad samoch l'roitev, until close to the line of liquid, kol kach she'ein shishim keneged hatipa anymore. You won't have shishim keneged hatipa. Harei nesa oiso mokom hagdera. So that area of the gdera of the pot will become asur. Now, so what? Well, now if it's still hot, if you're going to pour out your food through that corner, it's going to become asur. So what should you do? Rabbi Chama says, don't worry, stay calm. Number one, don't panic. Don't call 911. You have a tikkun. That's the problem. Forget about the gdera right now. You're concerned about the food. It didn't go inside. You have a takana here. Just leave it. Let it cool off. Don't touch it till it cools off. Once it cools off, you can pour it out. It won't absorb the blias of the gdera. Baruch Hashem. In other words, that this particular example, which appears to be a big problem, that we have a suffix, of course, as a result of mefapea, not mefapea, at least, if you have shishim keneged the amount that fell, you're safe. The only thing is, you have to wait until it cools off because, it may have spread a little bit.
By the way, a few years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
You had it.
Okay.
You see, it's good to know halacha. You don't have to throw everything away.
Of course, yeah. Anyway, we won't get into the Ramah right now. The Ramah is a small Ramah that talks about, does it make a difference if the pot is new or old? talk about it another time. Let's first see what the Mordechai writes.
It's going to be the Mordechai on the Mechaber?
No, the Mordechai on this sugya, on this thing, yeah. A second. Okay, so the Mordechai says like this. In all Isurim, really in all Isurim, we have a suffix. If Mixas Akeli becomes Asur, if we are required to cleanse the entire Keli. There's a suffix like that at Ligabe all Isurim. Because only a half, only a part of the Keli became. So, who's to say that the whole Keli needs to be dealt with? So we have that suffix Ligabe all. So he says like this. In the Gemara, in Zvachim, there the discussion was concerning only Kachim. So what did we see? Concerning Kachim, the Torah brought us a special pasuk to be machmir. So the Mordechai basically says, so the Torah is being machmir in that particular situation. It's understood, it can be understood, that without the Gzeres HaKasser for that, we would say that it's not mefapeh bechol hakeli. All right. So therefore, maybe that whole gzera is only by kachim, and you don't have to make any such requirements by ashar yisurim. Or he says, what's the suffix here? He's just explaining the whole dilemma here. Or the suffix is like this. Or you say that perhaps the opposite is true. That Gemara, that pasuk in Kachim is a Giloi Milsa. It's giving you the actual solution. It's actually giving you, it's revealing to you what the halacha is everywhere. And everything is alike. Everything is similar. Everything has the same din. That you say, Mefapeh bekuloi. Right? So the Mordechai basically just presents, clarifies to us what the dilemma is. We had the other various shittas that each one took a position. The Mordechai is basically telling us what the dilemma here is. And the Mechaber chose the smak. Even though he was very brief, he didn't get into all the details or explaining himself, but that's the shitta that he goes with. Just differentiates between if it's parallel to the food, if the tipa is falling parallel to the food, or if it's falling in the mokum areikan. So like this. So how does the Mechaber hold? The Svara goes like this. If it fell b'mokom or across the food, then regardless of how you hold, you're safe. If you have shishim, that is, if you have shishim keneged the tipa, then the tafshil is mutter. If you hold its mefapas in the whole keli, then okay, eventually it's going to go in too. It's going to be bottle, in other words. And even if you hold it's not mefapas, it's going to be okay, because then it doesn't become asr. Right? If you hold something is not mefapas, then what's the question? Especially if you hold that not mefapas means that if it's across the food, eventually it is mefapeh. I mean, regardless, once you have the tipa falling across the food, that is the best scenario, because regardless how you hold, there's no problem. The problem is if it fell shelo keneged the roitev, then we have a chashash that if it's mefapas, it could be mefapas the way Mechaber writes. If it's mefapas, maybe it's mefapas just so much so, and it doesn't get to the liquid, and you have a large surface that became asr, that became an avela. And of course, that is a problem only when you're going to pour for the time being. Besides the keli, what do we do with the keli is a separate story, but the problem right now is only going to concern how do you pour, how you get the food out. So that was the Mechaber. But just to review, the Shach and the Taz, or the Beis Yosef and the Taz, and I think the Grov was also of the same opinion, so we have the Beis Yosef, the Shach, and the Grov. They learned Pshat, that Mefapas b'chol hakli, and then it's Nizbatel, completely. If you hold it's Mefapea means b'chol hakli. And therefore, if you have shishim, you're fine. But if it's not mefapea bechol hakli, when it fell keneged the roitev, then mistama, probably it eventually will fall in both of the shishim. So that's how they learn pshat in the smak. The Taz holds, I think it's also the Isser Veheter, that if it's mefa'apas bechol hakli, then when it fell keneged the roitev, then it went into the tavshul, it was nismatel. But he makes that small distinction that if it's not mefa'apea, what does that mean? Not like the Shach and the Mechaber learned that it eventually falls in anyway, if it's connected to roitev. If you hold it's not mefapeh, then it remains in its spot. He holds pshat of eino mefapeh in the smak means eino mefapeh at all. Eino mefapeh means it stands where it is. And even if you cook later on a second bishul, it won't be mefapeh either. That's very important. Oh, I can cook another time. So the Chazon Ish on this I saw brings down that there will be a nafkamina between the Shach and the Taz concerning the thickness of the Gdera. That if you don't have enough thickness in the Gdera, keneged the tipa, it will make a difference how you hold. If you hold like the Taz or if you hold like the Shach. In other words, if you say it remains, if it remains, that means it's there. Or if you hold like the Shitas that say, if it's across the food, it eventually falls in anyway. Great, because otherwise I wouldn't have 60 against it. From the wall, from the thickness of the wall. Follow me? So the Chazon Ish says it will make a difference how you learn that smak concerning the opinion that it's not mefapea. If it's mefapea, you're okay, especially when you're across the food. But if you're not mefapea, what does not mefapea imply? Well, one pshat means not mefapea means that it eventually will fall in anyway. It's across the food because it's across the food. So eno mefapea is not a big deal. But the Taz says, no, eno mefapeh means it's not mefapeh. I mean, that's our whole suffix here. Is it or is it not? If it is, great. If it's not, then it stays where it is. Well, if it stays where it is, okay, fine. It may not be a problem. It stays where it is. It doesn't travel. Great. Yeah, but the Chazon Ish says, well, it can make a difference if you don't have shishim, keneged. How would you not have shishim? Well, it depends on, it could be that the thickness of the keli may make a difference.
Does shishim handle all the walls of the keli?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. They ask, why can't you include everything in the Gdera too? Why just the thickness? I think Rabbi Elyahu speaks about that. I think it's Rabbi Elyahu. He says, thickness of the Gdera are two entities. Remind me, I need to look into it. Remind me, I'll check it later. Two koiches, he says, two separate entities. Sometimes something can go and affect the Gdera and not affect the food. However, when you have steam, vapor, whatever, when it's all covered, then it all becomes one unit. It all becomes one. That's different. But otherwise, we have a situation where the two may not really mix. So that would be a difference between the Taz and the other Rishonim on how to learn the smak. And the other nafkamina is the Gabe de Kedera itself. Does it become us or not? So since we just have a couple minutes, maybe let's just finish the Ramon, then we'll review it next time. So we saw what the issues were here. That the Mechaber was mechalek between keneged roitev versus falling not keneged roitev. And then there's additional situations of whether it's covered with a lid, whether it fell on the handle. Maybe we'll get to that another time. But the Ramah says like this: Dafka Magdera Yeshana. We're talking about an old keli. Why would it make a difference? Well, an ok there means it was used before. It was used before there's other blias there. We're concerned about blias now. We're concerned about chanan. If this is the first time you're using a pot, you're only going to require shish neged the tipo. Kedelekhamon, Siman Tzadik Dalet, Gabi Kaf, like we will see later on, the Gabi Kaf, the Gabi putting in a spoon, inserting a spoon inside. It makes a difference. New spoon, first time, second time, and so forth. Because in the end, as we said before, as the Shach explains, it's not a concern so much about Hanan in the Kedera as Hanan in the Blias. And if this is a new pot, then it would not be a problem.
That being shishim times whatever fell on the outside of it?
No, if it would be a tipa, it would usually be okay.
I mean,
That's the way I understood. Yeah, the tipa, just drops falling, usually would not have a problem. Yeah, but maybe if it's more than a few tipas, that's where it would make a difference. I'm looking at the Shach now. He does say miudavka biyeshona bas yoima. He adds that when we talk, what the Ramah says that it's an old pot, we're talking about that it's bas yoima. In other words, from that day. Im lo kain, if not, then of course mashe bedoif neder lo nasa nevela. Given the noisin tamlev gam. Remember that noisin tamlev gam is an important halacha in Yore Deah that not everybody remembers, because things happen in the kitchen. Yes, and they may present a problem, but if that pot hasn't been used for a while, the pot may now need hagala. Okay, because it has basar b'cholov, but the food is okay. That can make a big difference, Ilan, right? I'm sure you've dealt with that, or you've covered that before, where we have halachas that concerning, of course, whether this particular situation has shishim or not, whether there's bittul or not. It's a big mess. Have some meruba or not? But wait a minute. Maybe it's not a problem to begin with because it's eino ben yoima. And guess what? This is not just about basar b'cholov. This is about other isurim too. Treif. Oh no! How could you use that pot? It's treif. Yeah, but when was it used last? And mechatchila, of course you can't. All right. I think we'll stop over here, Mitzvah Hashem. We'll continue next week. Some additional scenarios that the Mechaber brings about tipa falling on the pot. It's an example of it falling close to the fire, where the fire could have burnt it up anyway and it dried. So we will see that that can make a difference too. All right.